most of the clients that you will be working with have saved up for years or even decades to have this built. So you better have good answers, especially in this economy. Hello again, everyone. It's so nice to see you back here. If you guys are new here, hi, I'm Hannah. I'm an interior designer based in Metro Manila, Philippines. And today I will talk to you about what interior designers actually do for a living, aka my job. I will give you a glance of the design process, the struggles, expectations in this profession, and how's life in general as an interior designer. So if you are thinking of hiring an interior designer and just feel a little bit overwhelmed or just want to have an idea how the design process looks like, or if you're actually considering this as your career path, then this video might be helpful for you. Let's begin with the cold hard fact that interior design plays a huge part in how we experience spaces. So that means it improves our quality of life as it influences how we interact with spaces. There's also, of course, improved safety and functionality through proper planning. We also do considerations when it comes to cost effectiveness and its implications. Okay. And of course, we apply these considerations and package them and make them all. Now, a lot of people have the misconception that it only takes a good eye for design to be an interior designer. While I do agree that having a good eye and being keen to details is a must-have skill for interior designers, it's actually way more than that. Interior design is considered as a professional job, mainly because you will need someone or be that someone who actually knows the science behind making spaces work. And that means you would need to know and understand space planning, which is you need to know the efficient use of space, the flow, the relationship of areas with each other. There's also, of course, ergonomics, the study of flow and natural movement, making things user-friendly. There are standard dimensions and sizes to everything we practically use in our daily lives. There's also the science behind using and selecting colors, such as color theory and the psychological impact of it. On top of all that, someone who actually knows how to translate these visions into real-life applications. Interior designers are expected to have the technical skills to work on certain programs that create construction documents. We're also expected to do fast and critical decisions in solving site problems and also selections. We also double check and triple check stuff for you, so we make sure that everything's in place, making things more convenient, of course, for the client. You know, in summary, we overthink stuff for you so you don't have to. But before we dive into the technical aspect of interior design, let me explain to you how design ideas are formed. We usually start the project by asking our client the project details, so which means we usually ask for the floor plan, the project type, are there any existing site photos that we can use as reference. There's also the inspiration photos or peg photos that the clients usually share in order to describe what their style or vision and goals look like. And for ready-made sites like condo units, townhouses, or even old houses, we usually do some ocular visits so we can get a feel of the space and also do our site measurements and just assess the site in general by knowing what are the limitations, if there are any budget considerations, are there any structural guidelines that we need to know. So basically, we just gather the initial ideas. And now that you've got all of these necessary info, it's time for you to convert them into something more visual in order to sell your design right. In the process, you would be encountering a lot of design presentation boards, but you would more likely encounter these two from the beginning. These two boards are often interchanged. I'm a bit guilty about this, but let me describe to you the difference between these two boards. A mood board is something we're all quite familiar with, but it turns to be abstract in actual presentation use. So this means it focuses more on evoking feelings and getting the general idea of how the space should feel like. People would use textures, photos of nature to evoke a certain feeling of that. Compared to a concept board, which is, I think, more popular nowadays. I personally use this in my process. It's more tangible and more straightforward compared to the mood board. In concept boards, you would see actual photos of interiors or even furniture, and you would derive the inspiration or your solutions from that photo. So for example, some people would use a certain interior photo and say that this is the storage solution idea that I have in mind. There's also this furniture concept where you would see this as a potential accent piece in the space. I would say that the concept board is more systematic compared to the mood board, but the best thing about these two is that you can actually mix and match it whatever you like. You can also add some certain elements in order for you to convey your ideas to your client. Now, if you're wondering why this is important, it's because this is the first step to knowing that you and your client are actually on the same page. This would serve as a reference before you actually head on into the nitty-gritty details of the interior design process. Basically, you and your client understand each other and have the same vision and goal in the first step. Now, assuming that you and your client are now on the same page, let's talk about the technical aspect of the profession. These are the 3D models or the 3D renders. These are already the images or even walkthrough videos where you would see how the space would look altogether. It's like you're playing The Sims, except for the fact that you can't motherload your way through and you're burning every brain cell to fit the entire budget into this one space. But it is a great way for you to understand the visual balance between furniture and object. There's also, of course, a lot of construction drawings that we have to work on, such as the floor plan and furniture layout, like the ceiling plan, lighting and switch layout, power layout, elevations, the phase where you get to dissect the design into a more technical aspect in which you would review and further assess what are the structural implications to the design that you have to consider. Are there any outlets that you also have to take into consideration? Important items or sizes that were not initially reflected in the visualizations. Now, when you get all of these construction drawings settled, of course, you would need actual materials in order to supplement your ideas, right? So this is a time where you would usually procure materials and do your material board. So basically, your material board is a collection of actual materials that you're planning to use in the project. So you would be gathering actual product samples. A lot of suppliers that are actually really willing to give them to designers for free if you request it. There's always like a trial and error or a process where we go through considerations when it comes to material selections, consider the durability, if it's appropriate to use for the spaces. Like, for example, you wouldn't really use polished tiles in a bathroom as that would be very accident prone. There's also, of course, maintenance. We also consider the style of it, if it fits the whole theme of the house, and there's also the environmental impact. People would also expect you to create schedules. So these schedules are documents where you would put your FF&E. So FF&E are basically furniture, fixtures, and equipment. You would put them into one file showing the actual product, the supplier, are there any timelines that you have to consider, the specifications, dimensions. You would put them into one file just to have like a checklist for you and the client to coordinate. And it's important to know that interior design is a very collaborative and research-based profession by its core, which means it's actually a really huge advantage if you can read and understand people. I watched a video who is architect Dami Lee, and she made a video of the difference between architecture and interior design. She discussed about the skill of having an interior designer, which is being a people person, and I actually really agree with her because you have to be likable and you have to be good at communicating the whys in every decision that you make. I am telling you that you will do a lot of socialization in this field, and I'm not saying that interior designer should be extroverted because I'm definitely not an extrovert, but it is a really must-have skill to be a great communicator. It's a skill that you should be willing to improve. Interior design can be quite personal in a way, especially for my case who focuses more on residential. The design and construction phase usually requires a lot of money in order for it to make it work. It's important to be aware of that because most of the clients that you will be working with have saved up for years or even decades to have this built. Or for some people, it usually takes like a lot of money for them to invest in this space. So in every decision or in every selection that you make, you better have good answers, especially in this economy. It's really important to understand who you're designing for. This is something that I want to reiterate in a sense because translating your client's needs does not limit to the list of requirements they give to you in the first place, but rather it's what you analyze what their needs are, and that means having a really good relationship with the client in order for you to observe. As I've mentioned earlier, understanding and reading people can be quite an advantage because if we see it this way, the client is basically entrusting us with all the personal bits of information in their personal lives. Maybe this is just me being like a residential interior designer. One of the tips that I would like to share is probably you should design by listening. In order for you to make a design that works for them, it also helps to build a stronger relationship with your client. And that means you can help them decode their wants and needs. You would ask them the right questions and guide them in making certain decisions. You would also have to educate your clients about making realistic decisions, especially if it's to keep them in check with their budget and their long-term consideration. Beyond your client, of course, you would be also coordinating with a lot of people, so you would find yourself talking with several people all at the same time, especially when you're already in the procurement phase or the sourcing phase. There's always a constant back and forth with the situation with the suppliers and contractor, making sure that the site is actually ready to receive a certain item. At this point, your contractor and your client is messaging you and just pointing a gun to your head and just asking like, what are the updates? Are we on time? Are we gonna have everything delivered on schedule? So you better have great project and time management skills, okay? You guys are wondering, you would be working with several professionals and people of trade. So if you have a from the ground up project, you would usually have these people in your team. And if you're working on ready-made units like condo units or like townhouses, you would more likely work with them. So the next question is, can I become an interior designer? Well, yes, anyone can become an interior designer, but it does not happen overnight. I'm based in the Philippines, so there are laws regarding interior design profession, and one of those would be having a 4-year degree course. These schools would require you to go through internship with a senior designer. After graduating, of course, you would also need to review and pass your licensure examinations, which is actually a 3-day course. 1 day is allotted for your design test, where they would give you like a design problem, and you would have to produce all of the construction drawings and the renders within 8 hours. All of them by hand. Fun, right? The remaining 2 days would be mostly for your objective type of test. So these are usually the topics that we usually get it covered. Once you get your license, you would also need to maintain it. So usually we have a 3-year validity as of now for the licenses, and in order to maintain, we have to attend seminars that would garner us points, get certificate of good standing, and yeah. It's also important to know that here in the Philippines, you would be under PIID, or Philippine Institute of Interior Designers, which is the organization for interior designers. So do your due diligence in researching about the local laws or the laws where you want to work as an interior designer regarding the requirements. Now, of course, there's a lot of career paths of our interior designers, and this does not really limit to what I do. You can go to commercial design. You can also specialize in lighting design, furniture design. I've also have batchmates who work on event design, exhibit design. You can also be an interior design educator. The list goes on, to be honest. There are a lot of soft skills that you would develop as an interior designer that would help you create more paths in the process. Since we're talking about career as a designer, you might be asking, how much money are you earning? Or how do interior designers get paid? I have to be honest, I actually thought that there would be like a lot of money instantaneously in this profession, but boy, I was wrong. Of course, as a starter, you will not get that millionaire dream in an instant. Just for transparency, I will share how much my salary was in the first company I was in. So this was back in 2018. I recently graduated and got my license back then. So my starting salary was 18,000 per month. In 2019, I got promoted to team lead and I got 22,000 as my salary. I think this falls under the standard in the Philippines. I would say I consider myself a bit lucky on this because I slightly higher than what I know in some companies. So it really depends on the employer, because realistically a lot of people will try to exploit you, girl. There's also this consideration that here in the home country, design and construction is not much of a priority to the government. So yeah, just to manage your expectations, that's how it went for me. I'm not comfortable yet at sharing actual figures of how much I earn right now, but to give you an idea, I'm definitely earning much more as a self-employed interior designer with 6 years of experience than my corporate self. It does help me live comfortably. It helps me pay the bills, afford occasional luxuries such as traveling, and it helps me save. And that's something that I'm beyond grateful for. In terms of how we get paid, in my case, I'm usually project-based. We have this design fee that we usually compute by square meter, or depending on the design package that the client avails, and then we usually divide these into project milestones. So it's usually spread out throughout the month. Aside from the misconception of being a millionaire designer in the first place, I actually like my job because I personally have a really soft spot for residential and condo unit design, mainly because I find it really interesting on how people live their spaces in day-to-day cases. And you would be surprised how different all of the people are. On top of that, I also get to meet amazing clients who turn into friends in the long run. It's also really fulfilling for me after every project to see a project done. So I get a sense of fulfillment and pride in that. I have so many ideas and experiences that I want to share with you, but I'll probably reserve those for another set of videos in the future. If you are starting your home building journey and you don't know where to start, then this video might help. Thank you guys so much again for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye!
You've still got my heart. Maybe it doesn't have to be so bad. Long as